Who's the audience for this as the Democrat tries to embrace business, but more specifically small business today?
Well, it's something that you would show the business community, but it's consistent with the kind of populist, progressive image they want to show. Mm-hmm. This is smaller businesses, and so it's part of the competition agenda if you create more smaller businesses to compete with big businesses. At the same time, startups play well with the tech sector, as Harris well knows, coming from California. And there are a lot more small businesses now. There were 19 million new small businesses under Biden, a record. So this is a growing part of the economy.
Well, of course, if we're going to reduce the number of taxes or the amount of taxes small businesses will need to pay, in addition to some of the other things Harris is proposing, the question becomes, how do you pay for that? Something Biden wanted to do to pay for it was raise the capital gains tax rate for those earning more than $1 million to 39.6%. Harris said today, I want 28%. So she lowered the increase that's being looked for. Does that mean she has to raise taxes somewhere else to fund this? How is this math going to work?
Well, they haven't given us any tally of how they're going to pay for all these things, although she has, for prior proposals, dipped into about $3 trillion worth of proposals that the Biden administration previously put out. This is something that will scale back the capital gains, so it makes her appear more friendly to business in general, and it's probably somewhat realistic it's going to get scaled back in Congress anyway.
Yeah, there's a big difference between 39% and 28%. Have we finally found sunlight between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden on a major issue?
We have, but Biden proposed that multiple times, even with the Democratic Congress. He was never able to get it. Yeah. So it's maybe trying to get some political points, but you're not really giving anything up, because even if she was elected, the Biden plan didn't pass with a Democratic majority in Congress. So maybe she's starting giving away something in the negotiations to look better in the election.
Of course, as we consider Harris's tax policy, it is worth pointing out, and Mike, you were the editor on this story, we have a piece out today that looks at the tax cuts Donald Trump is proposing, could tally $10.5 trillion over a decade. That is more than every dollar of non-defense discretionary spending. So there's very big pay-for questions on his side as well. Something both of these campaigns seem to agree with, though, is that they would like to see U.S. steel stay in American hands. Talking about another economic issue here, specifically unions and steel workers. We learned today, based off Bloomberg's reporting, that Joe Biden is going to block that deal. How should we consider how that is factoring into this election cycle, not just potentially taking away an issue from Harris and Trump, but also senators in states like Ohio and Pennsylvania who are in tough races?
It shows less about this election cycle than a turn in American views about economics that have taken place over the last 8 years since Trump was elected, which Biden and Harris also are joining. A turn away from the neoliberal worldview under Clinton and George W. Bush to a Trump-Harris Biden view of being a little bit more protectionist, a little bit more economically nationalist, and being very much against having key U.S. industries fade away to foreign competition. It's a big populist message. They're both going after the working class in key states.
Yeah, we certainly are seeing a pattern establishing here when it comes to populism. Bloomberg's Mike Dorning, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we want to take a closer look at the politics behind these plans. We're joined now by Bloomberg Opinion's Nia-Malika Henderson. So, Nia, as Mike is talking to us about kind of the populist undertones of a lot of this, it does raise the question, they're going after the same batch of voters. Is this really about earning votes that they don't already have? Or are both of these plans catering to the bases where they already can count on votes being cast?
Well, listen, they're trying to do both, right? Sort of double down on their base, but also cross over to some voters that they might not be popular with yet. Working class voters, if you are Kamala Harris, you got to think about those working class voters in places like Pennsylvania, in places like Wisconsin, and Michigan. And if you're Donald Trump, he isn't doing as well as he wants to do among suburban voters, among college-educated voters as well. And so that is the play you see. I think if you're Kamala Harris, part of this is also there are criticisms around whether or not she has, beefed up her policy. Does she have enough policy proposals, and are those sort of explicit and detailed enough? So that's part of what she's answering here, too. And if you look at polls, voters by and large trust Donald Trump by maybe 10 or more points on the economy over Kamala Harris. So that's part of it as well. Typically you have the Republican Party as the party of business, right? And you've got in Donald Trump, somebody who is calling Kamala Harris Comrade Kamala, right? That she is from the far left of her party. So here she is talking about economics, talking about sort of bread and butter economic issues in a way that I think deflects from these criticisms and around that she's too far to the left and kind of captured by the progressive wing of her party.
To pick up on Kailey's question about undecided voters here, we had a really interesting conversation today. Spirited conversation, as always, with New Hampshire's governor, Chris Sununu, who's endorsed the Trump campaign, of course, having earlier supported Nikki Haley. He talked to us on the early edition of Balance of Power about these economic policies from the Harris campaign. He claims her plans will not resonate with undecideds. Here's what he said.
That financial stress, that anxiety, if you will, that stuff that keeps them up at night, that's what drives a voter. And that 10 to 12% of swing voters that are still out there, that's far and away the number one issue. Not so much on the macroeconomic scale. I get nervous about that. But day to day, family to family, it's all about how we're going to pay our bills and who's the agent of change. Clearly not the current administration.
I want to pick up on that idea because we can balance these two economic proposals against each other. Everyone seems to have a take. They both result in trillions of dollars in deficit spending. But what about this idea of being an agent of change when you've been in the House for 3.5 years?
Yeah, listen, I think her being the agent of change is about her identity, quite frankly, right? She is saying, do Americans want to get past the era of old men, right? And embrace someone who...
Even as she's working for.
Yeah, even as she's working for an older gentleman. So I think that is part of the implicit argument that she's making. You can see, polls suggest that they are sort of buying into that. They don't necessarily tie her so closely to the Biden administration or Biden. And you can see that in the polls, right? Voters that Biden wasn't doing well with, younger voters, African-American voters, Latino voters, women voters, she is doing off-the-chart numbers in a way that you didn't see from Biden. Yeah. And partly, I think some of the data suggests that people sort of liked Biden's policies by and large, but it was Biden they didn't like. It was him that they thought just couldn't carry the load for another 4 years because of his age. And she, I think, because she is younger, because she's a woman, because she's a woman of color, is a different messenger and can put a different spin on these policies.